Director Beck, would you please read board priorities?
Yes, I'd be happy to. The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff. Direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impacts of poverty on our students, their families, and our community.
Director Snyder, would you read mission and vision statement, please?
Absolutely, Mr. President. Our mission statement reads, to enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. Our vision statement reads, education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and the community to answer the question, what if?
So any board reports? Director Hayes.
The board would like to extend our deepest condolence to the Kelly family. Vera Kelly, who's a prominent member in the community and usually attends the majority of our board meetings, lost her husband yesterday. And in addition, we just also would just pray that everyone that's dealing with this pandemic to do all they can to remain safe.
Additional board reports?
Mr. President?
Director Beck.
Yes. Sorry, I'm going to let Karen go. I've got some children in the background.
Director Klein-Jerome.
I would just like to say that I zoomed in to the Department of Ed meeting last week. I found it very informative. They seem very pleased with the progress that we are making to this point.
They even let us speak.
Yes, all of us that were in on it.
Director Beck.
Yes, sorry about that. I was going to say the same thing, that it was informative and helpful to be at the State Board of Education meeting, and it was good to hear that they feel that we're making progress on our citations. And then the other thing I would like to say is I would encourage the board and the district to think about the unlikelihood that it will be safe to return to in-person learning at the end of 2 weeks, and to consider making a decision to extend remote-only learning until the new year. Thank you.
Other board reports. Director Gosa.
I have a couple. First, the state board meeting. I thought that was a good conversation with the state board members. I do want to thank directors Klein, Jerome, Beck, and Hayes for being on there and speaking, and I spoke as well. I also would like to thank all of our staff and employees of the district through working through these crazy times we're in right now and putting all the extra effort and everything in to make all this stuff happen, as well as to our students and parents that are doing the remote learning, you know, working with us as we're getting this stuff done. I do appreciate all of you as well. And then President Potts and I had an SRO meeting where we went over kind of the evaluation process and stuff, and we're looking at trying to get a joint meeting together with the city council in February because they start their budget discussions in January. So we're going to try to do a joint board city workshop to go over that stuff in case anybody has questions about things like that. And then also, I'm just going to throw this out there. Anyone who has tested positive with COVID, please consider going and donating your plasma to help other people out that are fighting it right now, because there's a huge shortage on that. And just do the right thing and mask up, for Pete's sake, so we can get out of this. And that's all I got.
Any other board reports? Director Beck.
Sorry, one more. I forgot to mention that I wanted to wish interim Superintendent Schneckloff a speedy recovery. I heard that he was released from the hospital, and I think I can speak for the board when I say that we're all happy to hear that.
Okay, we'll move to open forum. Is there anyone online that wishes to speak at open forum? If so, you will have 2 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Yes, my name is Antoine Johnson. I stay at 2650 Pacific Street, Davenport, Iowa. My kids attend Adams, and I know everyone is in, they have their concerns with the pandemic, but this remote learning, it is not beneficial to the kids because they get too comfortable at home. They need that personal teacher interaction, and I'm not understanding why that you guys as a school board, the private schools, they get to attend in person 5 days a week with the right precautions, mask, taking the temperature, things of that nature, but the public schools, they can't. They're under all of these different restrictions. Can anyone explain to me why that is? Because at this point, I feel it's just a monetary thing because you pay to go to private school but not to public school.
Sir, could you do me a favor and spell your name for us? Spell your last name.
ANTWOINE, and my last name is Johnson, JOHNSON.
Thank you, sir. You may not be aware, but the board is not allowed by public meetings law to respond to any comments made at open forum because it's not on our pre-published agenda.
Wow. Okay. So is anything, is there any?
I will have somebody contact you the next day or so at your
Okay.
home to answer your questions.
Okay.
Thompson.
No problem.
And can you then send us a phone number where you can be contacted?
Yeah, I can send it to you or I can give it to you now, however you want to do it.
Why don't you just send it to us so it's not public knowledge?
Okay, will do.
Does anybody else want to speak at open forum? Anyone else for open forum? And we'll move to the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. President,
Director Hayes,
I move the board accept the consent agenda as written.
is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Gosa. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Director Schneider.
I'd like to pull out the supplemental contracts for $750 so that we can discuss those. I have some questions on them.
Do we need a motion on that? No. No? Okay. So we'll pull out the 750 supplementals, all of them? Is that correct? Okay. We'll put those aside for discussion. Any other discussion on the consent agenda? There being none, we'll move to the vote. Director Hayes, we're voting on the consent agenda absent the $750 supplementals. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Poston,
Yes.
Director Snyder,
Yes.
and my vote is yes, the motion carries. We have some conversation now on those supplementals.
I have a general understanding of what they are, but I would like a better definition of what these are, and I guess for the benefit of the entire board. So if Jamie's on or somebody can.
Is like Rob Scott or somebody or Bill Schneeman?
I'm on. It's Jamie. Can I take a quick minute to look back at those?
Yeah.
Jamie, they're all the TLCS CTT guides.
Oh, got you. Okay, thank you. There for TLCS, there are so annually they post new positions, the CTT guide positions, and those were recently posted towards the beginning of the school year, and they interview for those. And those are the positions, the individuals on the consent agenda are all of the individuals that were identified to successfully interviewed to fill those positions, and they get a $750 supplemental for that CTT position.
And Jamie, that money though comes from a separate fund, right?
That's my understanding, but I don't want to say for sure. I would want to talk to Lisa about that.
It does. I
Okay.
was just trying to clarify, but TLC was a separate funding.
It's out of our allotment from the teacher leadership and compensation money we receive annually from the state.
Yeah, it's a categorical that can only be spent on teacher leadership, and it doesn't. It can't be spent on the general fund, so it's not something that you could spend it differently for teacher leadership, but you couldn't spend it for something else. So it's not a savings possibility.
Perfect. That answers my questions.
Okay. Are there any other questions on those $750 TLC supplementals? Then that chair will entertain a motion to approve them.
Mr. President,
Director Hayes?
I move that the board accept the TLCS 750 payments to employees.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Gosa. Did you second that? Discussion on the $750 TLC supplementals. There being none, we'll move to a vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome,
Yes.
Director Beck,
yes.
Director Postian,
Yes.
Director Snyder,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. The motion carries. Chair will entertain a motion on the approval of bills.
Mr. President.
Director Hayes. Oh, Director Snyder. Well, your hand was going for the button.
Mr. President, I move that the board accept or adopt or approve the adoption of the bills from the bill period listing of 11/7/20 to 11/18/20. Whereas resolved, all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the secretary, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn on the treasury for several amounts. Further resolved, the payments of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of 11/7/20 to 11/18/20.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Discussion. Being no discussion, move to the vote. Director Snyder,
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome,
Yes.
Director Postian,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. The motion carries. Superintendent's report. Bill?
Sure. There are three things that I would like to report on. First, you've already heard some board reports, but I did want to make sure that the comments about the State Board of Education meeting were reiterated. All of your comments were appreciated. The fact that there were several of you there and you were all willing to speak, I think, did help the district. I think the reports of the department, as well as the reports that some of the rest of us submitted, we were told the entire message that put out was a very positive message to the State Board of Education members. So there's a lot of work left to do, and we're going to talk about some of that tonight, but that certainly was a step in the right direction. So I really want to applaud the board members that were willing to step up and talk at that meeting and make a good impression. The next thing I would like to report on is just earlier this afternoon, I did get an email from Thomas Mays, the legal counsel for the Department of Education. And I know there's been some conversation about how the chief financial officer search and process would proceed. What that email said was that the state board had given authority to hire a 6-month position for superintendent, which is interim superintendent Schneckloff, and a 6-month CFO position. If you recall, we did a great deal of work on trying to find an appropriate person, and we did not find interest in a 6-month position, and have moved then to looking at a permanent CFO position. What Thomas May's position is, and therefore the department's position, is that is not something that the state board would approve or the Department of Ed would approve. They can direct our process, but eventually that's going to come to you as a board for your approval. I will describe to you what is happening with that process. I do think that it's not going to end up being that much different than a normal process for you in a scenario that we didn't have any of this interim or any of this 6-month stuff going on. You would have district leadership running a process in which they would interview and screen and check references and so on and so forth, and then they would bring a candidate to you as a board to approve. That's exactly what is happening right now. Interim Superintendent Schneckloff would be a part of that and was a part of the original conversations, but as of this moment, obviously he hasn't been. But the interview process has been laid out to include the Department of Ed, to have a representative on the interview committee. The IASBO director, executive director of IASBO, which is the Iowa Association of School Business Officials, has been a part of the process. Also, the director of the Iowa School Business Management Academy, run through Iowa State University, has been a part of that process. In addition to Jamie, HR director here in Davenport, and some representation from AEA staff, Shane and myself, and then some appropriate folks. So I think that we've put together a process that you can have confidence in. It's not something that anyone is trying to railroad or do it any different way than you would do it yourselves. And in fact, probably bringing in a whole nother level of scrutiny by those outside experts being a part of the process. So I don't anticipate it being long until we do bring a recommendation for a candidate to you for a permanent CFO position. So I would open, before I would continue on to another topic, I would open that up for any questions you might have.
Director Beck.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this right. So you guys are doing the screening process, the group of people that you mentioned, as if, say, we hired a search firm and then they brought us, a slate of candidates. The administration would narrow that slate down and then conduct interviews, and then we would just do the final approval. So that's basically, you guys are filling in that search and initial and interview process, correct?
Right. I mean, I think we're performing the same kind of search that a search firm would search for candidates, and then we're also running through the interview process, which might normally be directed by your HR department, but we've included Jamie, so she's been a part of that.
Okay.
As a board, this isn't going to be any different from your perspective than it would be otherwise. This isn't like a superintendent opening where you, the board, would be involved. This would be something administration would bring to you.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Director Gosa.
Well, you kind of touched on my question. Is there a way for the board to be involved? I know our two employees are the board secretary and the superintendent, but the CFO is a pretty important job, and that's gotten us into a lot of trouble with the finances and stuff. So later on, I'm gonna, not today or anything, but I'm gonna be asking about a policy for the board to be involved, that the CFO would give reports to the board, not just the superintendent, so we don't wind up right back where we are now. I mean, not where we are now, but where we were before. But that was just a question I had. I don't know if you can answer that or not.
Yeah, the process that we're working through was something that was directed to us by the Department of Ed. I mean, we had to put it in front of the department to have that approved. And so at this point, I don't think the answer would be affirmative to that, but I think you as a board can make a determination like that for the future.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, not to get into everything, but I mean, we did hire a search firm and we got someone that wasn't totally, but whatever. But the CFO is a huge job. I mean, just as much as the superintendent. I mean, they can make or break a district, especially if they don't know the right things to look for. So I think as a board, we need to be more involved with that stuff, whether it's we're asking questions or, I guess myself personally, I feel better voting on someone the way things are now. If we kind of were in it a little bit and heard some of the things, when they're being interviewed and stuff. Not saying I don't trust anybody, but we're not really in a good spot right now, and we need to get out of that spot, with good quality people. So that was just a question I had. So,
Well, I think specifically to your question, that is one of the reasons why I very intentionally included a DE rep, an IASBO rep, and a academy rep. And so that that it's not something that is just, only locally driven and being handled in the same way that it's been handled in the past. I mean, this is something that will include, the people that their entire organization's premise is to train good people.
okay.
Now, that being said, I think you're aware that I've personally put a lot of time into working to find candidates. And, we started with the part of the conversation is there was not a candidate that was willing to serve a 6-month term in that. And there are not a plethora of candidates out there. And so this is one where I think the group will come up with a candidate that they will be able to endorse to you, or else we will not make an endorsement. I mean, that's really where it comes, where it's way better to not hire someone than it is to hire the wrong person. And I think we all know that. And I think those organizations know that. So I hope that you can have some confidence in the process, even though, it does just fall into one of those conversations where there's the DE process and then there's the local process. And this is one that kind of is flowing a little bit in between both of those. So I think this is one where you probably are going to have to accept the fact that the DE said how that process is going to go. If you would choose to, at some point in the future, change that process, I think you can. But right now, I don't think that's a board option.
I guess for clarity, I do trust you to get it done, especially with all the stakeholders. And maybe I'm thinking of something down the road, because obviously we had people that applied for this, but we were told we didn't have anybody. And that's something that should have never happened. So I was trying to figure out a way for us to circumvent that from ever happening again. And maybe that's something we need to do later on down the road.
And, Director Ghost is talking about something that he heard, and those of you that attended the State Board of Education meeting heard me say this previously, is that there are some qualified candidates that are in the pool of folks that applied to the district and also that applied to the search firm. And so I do think that we will be able to make a recommendation to you, but I assure you that if we can't, we won't.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
The other,
Hey, Bill, could you tell me, is it, of all the people on this board, is it one person, one vote? I mean, does the DE get more say in who we're hiring versus you and Shane and Jamie and the other groups that you put on there?
no, that interview committee will operate from a consensus perspective. So if there's a candidate that comes forward, it will be a consensus of the entire group. It won't be a disagreement of people.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on that one?
Linda?
When we last met, you said that there were a couple potentially good candidates that were there. I'm wondering if that number has increased, or are you still looking at those two?
Yeah, those are the two that we're interviewing initially, but we're not saying that that's the pool. I mean, if those two candidates are not viewed as the appropriate candidate, then we will expand the pool and keep moving. And there will be a certain degree of frustration if that is the way that it turns out. I hope that it doesn't, but if that's what it takes to find the right candidate, that's what we'll do.
Thank you.
Ken?
I think we need to be careful when we talk about throwing everything on to the CFO, because the direction has to come from the board. So I don't think all blame can be put on a CFO. So I think we've got to be careful in that regard. And I do appreciate what you are doing, Bill, and your group as far as working on finding the CFO.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, the other topic I wanted to discuss a little bit was something that Director Beck brought up earlier, and that is where the district sits in regard to a waiver for remote learning, and it also affects the public comment for the evening. The way that the pandemic has been handled prior to the last couple weeks is that if someone tested positive in the community, there was contact tracing done by public health. So public health would do contact tracing and would let the district know if there was somebody included in that contact tracing, either that they needed to quarantine because of the contact level that they had with somebody who tested positive, or let the district know that there was actually a positive case. I believe it's probably just a function of the level of positive cases has gotten so high that contact tracing is probably not feasible. I don't think that they would have made that decision if they had the ability to do it, but public health notified all school districts in the last couple weeks that they could not be contact tracing any longer. So at a meeting late last week, Jamie volunteered to run a survey of our staff to kind of do our own internal research of how is our staff being affected. And the results of that that have been turned into this point is there are an additional 52 staff members who would either be testing positive or being quarantined as of today. So what that means is there is almost no other choice from a staffing perspective than for the district to apply for an additional waiver. Now, I am fully and absolutely supportive of what Antoine Johnson called in to talk about. the idea that where is the best instruction? It's face-to-face instruction. Who has the biggest influence in learning on students? Teachers. Do students need the structure of school? Absolutely. Where is the best place for students to be in school? There is absolutely no disagreement, and I wish it was a different answer. But the fact is, and I can't speak to the private schools. I don't know their level of contact tracing. I don't know their level of students being impacted, or excuse me, staff being impacted. But I do know the level of the Davenport schools, and know that the decision to apply for another waiver is going to be based on the staff and the ability to serve students, because it doesn't do any good to have students come to school if there are not staff there to teach them. And that can create an even bigger issue. So we are going to be proceeding forward with that. I do want to clarify one thing that Director Beck had asked as a question, I think, earlier. She asked that the board take action to create a remote learning plan until the end of the winter break. And that's not the way the process works through the state. Now, we may do that and we may get there, but the way the process works is the district can ask for a waiver that would at maximum last 14 days. And if you do a little bit of math there, you will see that the 14 days, right now the waiver that is currently in effect lasts until next Tuesday. If you add 14 days to that, it's going to be the Tuesday right before break. And so there will be another small gap there in which the district will have to decide, are students going to come back earlier than the waiver lasts? I'll explain that a little bit more in a second. Or are they going to come back just during that time frame, like a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right before winter break? Or will the district apply for another waiver that would last another 14 days? And so I do want to explain that first option that I talked about. The district can apply for a 2-week waiver right now, but we can continue to monitor where the staff sits, and we can make a decision to return to face-to-face learning before that 2 weeks expires if there is enough staff to cover schools. And so it doesn't have to be a full 2 weeks that is used. And so what our cabinet talked about was the idea of notifying our community midweek for what the plans will be for the following week. And with a board consensus, I would like to think that that's maybe our best option, is that we apply for a 2-week waiver, but we reevaluate midweek each week to look at where are staffing numbers, where are student numbers, what's the positivity rate in the county. You know, the way that we're escalating right now, it's easy to be very pessimistic, but I hope that we'll have a lot of people that will listen to Director Goza's encouragement to wear a mask and let's do everything that we can all do to get through this, and maybe we'll see the curve take a little different trajectory. So that would be my recommendation, but I will tell you that we're at the point of just being ready to push send, and that waiver will go into the state to be approved for the following 14 days. We can actually apply for the waiver and not use it, but I'm telling you right now, based on staff data, we're going to need to use it through at least next week. So that's the other item that I wanted to report on, and I'll take questions on that, but that after that issue, that's the extent of the report today.
On the waiver, is it like all or nothing, the whole district?
No.
So has any consideration been given to keeping elementary open and then using our sub-resources to maintain our elementary schools being open?
Absolutely. And we are actually going to spend the next week so that by midweek next week, if we're going to make that change, we can have some time to have had the conversation and to prepare if that's possible. And that is a likelihood that I think could be out there.
Bruce.
Director Beck?
Thank you for clarifying. I did understand how it worked. I just kind of wanted to make sure we got it on the table. So I guess my one concern would be the potential for flipping back and forth if we're operating sort of on a week-to-week basis. I appreciate that we can always return early, and that actually makes me really happy if we start to see that we have staff. Because like you, of course, I think, you know, it's better if we can be in person. Absolutely. The students benefit from that support and interaction. But I guess, you know, assuming when we go back in person, we'd still be on a hybrid plan, right? Because we'd be keeping students in smaller groups. I want to make sure that's the case if we go back.
Yeah, that would be the plan at current levels anyway.
Okay. And then, but I guess, so my concern is that we would end up potentially set ourselves up for sort of switching multiple times, you know, and that can be really hard on people as well. It's the inconsistency. And so I guess I just kind of want to voice that that's something to think about as well, because not everybody can, you know, quickly switch from one to the other, either because they need to make plans for childcare or whatever, or just kids, you know, change is hard sometimes. And it can be hard on them when we're just kind of going back and forth. I guess I do wonder I understand the science behind the 14-day waiver application, because there's a 14-day incubation period and et cetera. But I guess I'm curious as to if you know why it is not possible to apply for a longer term waiver, especially when we see a situation like we're in now, where positivity rates are so high that realistically expecting them to come down in 2 weeks and have enough staff back in 2 weeks may not be the case. I don't know if you have an answer for that, but that's my other question.
Now, the 14 days was set by, I believe, a governor's proclamation and the Department of Ed. So, I mean, that's not something that is up for debate. You are right, the statistics, especially in our area. I mean, obviously at the AEA, we're working with 21 districts, and Jackson County to the north is the highest, and quite a bit higher than Scott County. Clinton is higher also than Scott County. And then as you go south, Muscatine and Louisa tend to get a little bit less. But I think the scenario that we would have to evaluate is whether, I agree with you, the transition isn't a great thing, but we would have to evaluate, is it better for students to transition and to get some teacher time and to make sure that every student is being contacted and every student is engaging and having that teacher checkup of what they need about learning? You know, to me, I think that does outweigh the hassle of the transition. I will tell you that we've also had some conversation, and I actually talked about it at the last board meeting, that we will be bringing some data to you as a board. If we go into another waiver period, we will be bringing some data on checking up on students, on what is student attendance look like, how are students engaging, are they what are their grades, what is their assignment. We're still kind of debating on what some of the data points we will actually bring to you, but we will bring data to you so that you understand what is actually happening out there. If the data is worse than expected, then we might make a stronger effort to make sure that we get out of it. If the data shows that students are actually engaging and that there's a success rate that's greater than what we would think, then maybe there's an ability to be a little more conscious of the health side because the education side might be working, but we won't know that until we have data for you to look at. It was probably premature to get into that after 7 days of doing this right now, but if we have another waiver and we start to have 2 and 3 weeks, then I think you'll be entitled to look at some of that data.
Kent?
Well, that was going to be my first question. I definitely want that data. I want to know that every student is being contacted and there's been some engagement. The other thing that Bruce brought up is possibly opening up the elementaries and getting those students in class. I think that's more critical for that age group than, say, the high school level. The other concern I have is our athletic teams and our extracurricular activities. To me, if there's a coach out there that's willing to open up the gym and have those kids come in and practice, then they should be allowed to do that. Why should we hamstring these kids? Okay, and what are they doing anyway when schools close? They're meeting somewhere to play basketball. Okay, so it's just so unfair to these kids. I mean, really, it's a form of child abuse. Not having them allowed to be in school, and then as a taxpayer, I'm upset that we've got all these expensive buildings in the district, and there they sit, shuttered up. Our kids can't. Our athletic teams cannot go in there and use them, and it just hurts these kids. I mean, it's just taken away a big chunk of their adolescence.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good points that you made there, Ken. And I mean, you're not going to find a person that is more of an advocate for the difference extracurriculars make in kids' lives. And I don't mean just athletics. I mean fine arts, clubs, just anywhere where students belong to a group with a caring adult in charge is a great place for a student to be. And missing that is heart-wrenching. And I agree with you entirely. To have a student who was a senior last year or, going through a high school career right now is, it's tough. I agree with that. Now, this is not a local decision. I think it's important that you know that. This isn't a local decision. And, there are times, and this isn't a local decision for any other district either. This is outside of control. But if we can get back into a learning environment, I think there should be a priority to try to do that because that's one of the reasons why is what you just described.
Bill, I would like to thank you for discussing this with the cabinet, looking at lots of options on how we could close, partially close, what it's going to look like, and what's going to happen next week when we come back from Thanksgiving, when our 14 days are up. And this whole conversation, I appreciate that you are, out there telling us exactly what's been discussed. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I mean, whether you're talking about extracurriculars or whether you're talking about academics, the sooner we can get back, the better. And as soon as the statistics of our staffing that's available will allow it to happen, and as soon as we can make sure that both students and staff are safe and not at risk, we're going to to make every effort to make that happen.
Any other questions? Director Gosa.
I just want to clarify. The state's the one who said no to the athletics and stuff. That's not like the local district did that. That was a state decision. The governor actually in her proclamation about youth sports and stuff.
So the fact that the district has a waiver to not be in school
Right.
dictates extracurriculars. So the proclamation says that you can't have a waiver on the academic side and then still participate in extracurriculars. If the district was in session, then extracurriculars could still happen. So that's where the local control piece of it is. But it's not local to be able to make the decision that in our current scenario that we're going to open the gym or we're going to have practice or have, open the band room and have kids in for that either. It's, it does put a premium on the fact that we need to get kids back. We just talked about how it's important for elementary kids to get back, and you as a board saw the statistics on fast testing and how much of an impact that the pandemic has had on young kids' literacy scores. Well, but you can't have the idea that if it's more important to bring young kids back if extracurriculars are important to you, because if you don't have high schools in session, then you can't have extracurriculars. So, it is truly, it is just a scenario where we as a community and we as a society have to say, we're going to do what needs to be done, mask up, wash hands, social distance, try to not get into any extra exposure over the holidays as best you can. Because if there's a scenario that I'm mostly worried about, it's what are the statistics going to look like 14 days after Thanksgiving and 14 days after Christmas. What we're seeing right now might be nothing compared to that if people don't change behavior. And, there's part of that that's school related, but most of it is community related and societal. So I hope that folks are hearing that message and that we are not dealing with even more. I'll take the liberty. I don't think he would care. TJ Schneckloss says, do whatever you can do to make sure you don't get this. That was his exact words to me. It's not fun. It's not a good deal. I hope the best for him to recover. And, he is doing better and he will recover, but I'm not sure that it's going to be a short process because it's a tough thing to get it. It's worth avoiding as a community.
And I just want to thank you for having this discussion with the board. I have 4 kids at home. I have 3 in school. I get it. I have 1 doing hybrid and 2 of them doing 100% online. I understand, and no matter what we do, you're not going to please everybody. You never are. But it's the same people that are kind of negative about things that won't do the right thing most of the time. I would love for all the kids to be back in school because I do think that the face-to-face, the social interactions and everything is the best for them. But right now, where we are with people that don't want to do the right thing, we can't afford to put our staff at risk, our students, and then heaven forbid something gets spread in the building and then it gets taken home and then spread out even more. I'm totally in support of going for the waiver until things calm down. I get it. I understand I'm a huge sports parent and other extracurriculars. It sucks for my kids right now, but we gotta do what we gotta do to get through it, or it's just gonna keep going and going and going and getting worse. But again, I do thank you for your discussion, and I appreciate the update.
Any other questions? Bruce? Director Posture?
Were you done with your report?
Yeah.
Okay. Could you take one other question?
Sure.
Okay. Originally, Karen and I we were set up for meeting with you and Gary Sinclair the first Wednesday of every month. Is that still on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And will that
So it
be?
should be December 2nd. I haven't actually seen a schedule for that yet, but I will work with Brenda to get a schedule and get an invite out to you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You bet. Yeah, that's not temporary. I mean, the finance committee is going to be an important piece of the board moving forward, and it's going to be an important piece of the district being in a better spot for years to come. So I appreciate both you and Karen's willingness to be there, and we are going to have a conversation later tonight about some IASB conversation in which we're going to talk about how do we take committee information and make sure that the whole board gets that. So that'll be a part of the IASB process over the next few months.
And then Karen and I are both anxious to get started on next year's budget, and hopefully will we be able to do some of that in December yet?
Probably not by December 2nd, but somewhere later in December, that will be something we can talk to Gary about doing.
Okay.
But you're not alone. I mean, we are going to get started on this as soon as possible, so that any implications of the budget are not something that is a last minute kind of situation at all. We want to be very planful.
Okay, because Karen and I would like to see it as soon as possible.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, we'll move to items requiring action. The chair will entertain a motion on the approval of the AirCorps contract.
Mr. President,
Director Hayes,
I move the board approve the contract with AirCorps as presented, which was $840,000, $179.83, with the district being responsible for $168,035.97.
is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Gosa. Discussion?
Mr. President?
Director Beck?
I have a question that goes to this and probably to the next one as well. Are these competitively bid when we initially set them out? Are these do we reevaluate the cost effectiveness and the services we get from these providers? I don't know if Gary's here to answer. Gary Slope.
I am.
Oh, okay, good. So I noticed that we were getting a discount from one of the vendors, but and I understand that these are absolutely essential products. So I'm not saying we don't we don't need them, but I'm just curious as to how often we evaluate which company is providing the best services and whether we're getting the best deal.
Certainly. With the AirCorps contract, I can tell you that this is a federal program through E-rate. What's going on there is based on our free and reduced population, we get a significant portion of the cost of this. In this case, it's wireless access points. That gets paid 80% by the federal government, and we are obligated for the 20%. Part of the obligation that is put upon us is that we not only bid this, but we bid it nationally. It goes out to a national clearing, so we can entertain bids from all across the country, and there are some that we see come in on a regular basis and just have boilerplate type stuff, and then we get companies like in this case AirCorps who really understands what we're doing and gets to the heart of the issue that we're after. We've in the past 3 or 4 years we've been able to really do a lot of great things for the district, wireless and network closets and that sort of thing through E-rate funding for the most part. So yes, it's absolutely competitive, and we are always seeking the best resources we can get.
Thank you.
Additional questions? We'll move to the vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Postian,
Yes.
Director Snyder?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, the motion carries. Chair will entertain a motion on the approval of the Netrix contract.
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board approve the contract with Netrix in the amount of $85,178.28.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Gosa. Discussion?
Gary, I would like to commend you for looking at this contract in particular. I see with cost savings in mind. I think this was really well done, and I appreciate you getting the savings here.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Move to the vote. Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director
Yes.
Gosa?
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome?
Yes.
Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Postian?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, the motion carries. Move to discussion items. Discussion and a presentation on district hiring, retention, and professional development process.
I'm here. Is it okay if I go ahead and share my screen?
Yes, you can do that.
Thank you. It says that it's disabled by policy. Is Mary able to let me? Thank you.
You should be able to do it now.
Thank you. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so TJ had given me a board request that I think dated back to May and asked if I would pull together a presentation and present it to the board. So the request was for some information on our hiring, retention, and professional development processes. In keeping with the Department of Ed's continuous improvement process, I'm utilizing the same format that Corey Guy did a couple weeks ago. So let me go to the next one here. What I'll first go through is the current state. So what our desired state is, what our current state looks like, and where the gaps are between the current and desired states. So for a desired state with hiring, you want a fully compliant hiring procedure that meets the needs and requirements of our internal and external stakeholders. For retention, you want turnover data that is collected and utilized to drive retention strategies across the district. And then professional development, you want professional development rolled out and the reporting is standardized, the rollout and reporting is standardized across the district. So for current state on with hiring, there is a hiring procedure document. The guidelines, it's established guidelines for the selection of candidates to interview teams, the interviews itself, selection of the best candidate, completion of recommendation for hire, notifications to be sent to candidates not chosen, records retention, and then the annual review of the procedure itself. So there's a hyperlink in here that I can take you to. So just to show you, this was put together back in 2018, and you can see there's guidelines given for each one of those areas, and you can see, guidelines for the selection of candidates to interview. They need to have a fully completed online application through AppleTrack, what's required of the applicant, and the details are given for each step within the hiring process. Now, current state with retention, there is not a formal retention plan in place. For professional development, within some of the contracts, there are required days that have been negotiated. So for teachers, the provider is curriculum instruction and assessment, and they get 7 days per year. For the paras, the provider for professional development can be the building principals, it can be special education, it can be HR, and they get 2 days per year per their contract. The secretaries, that can be done by human resources. The unions also provided training the secretaries in the past, and they've negotiated a day per year. And security, Bruce has done training for security, and then HR as well, and they've negotiated 2 days per year. Custodians and maintenance, operations and HR is a provider for training. They do not have a contractual requirement. Food service, also food service and HR provides professional development. They do not have a contractual requirement. And then non-bargaining is whether it's the department or human resources, and they also do not have a contractual requirement. Now, the current state professional development, on top of that there is professional development site that is managed by the curriculum and instruction and assessments department, and they do include a learning calendar. And then what HR has, and here I'll open it up real quick, and this is from Corey's team. You can see that by year, you've got new teacher training. There's training from August to September, and then up to April of 2021. And then what was new for this year for HR, for returning staff, there's so many training requirements. I don't really want to call them professional development. They're more of compliance related, but we put them all on a website, so it was easy for individuals, employees to go in, and they can click up at the top to see, okay, I'm certified staff. Below are all of the training requirements that need to be completed at the beginning of each year. You can, like I mentioned, it's more of the compliance side, but work rules, ACEs, suicide prevention, curriculum, bullying and prevention, and that goes on for administrators, non-bargaining, secretaries, para-educators, food service, guest teachers, custodian, and maintenance, and then there's mandatory reporter training. So that was something that was done this year. And next in the presentation is identifying the strengths and barriers. So what are the needs that need to be addressed? So the strengths and barriers for hiring, the strengths are that there is a formal procedure and guidelines available for staff to reference, and it provides specific detail on how to complete the hiring and selection process. Now, barriers that I've identified is that the procedure has not been updated and reviewed annually as stated within those guidelines. So that is something where HR needs to go to the stakeholders to get feedback for process improvement ideas. And then also developing a training that can be deployed for current staff members, but also something that's readily accessible for new employees as they start. So anyone that's coming in new to the district that would be in a position of hiring has something to reference, and it's something that we could assign them to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Because with the lack of consistency in hiring practices across buildings, that could lead to non-compliance. For retention, the strengths I have is not applicable because there isn't currently a retention plan in place. So the barriers is there is not any current retention data. So turnover rates, reasons for leaving, and whether it's voluntary, involuntary. And so without that data, you're not able to pinpoint critical reasons for leaving, and then you're not able to compare your stats with the stats of other school districts, because in some cases there's good retention and there's bad retention. So getting an understanding of, if we have the numbers, how we would align with other districts. Are we kind of in the right area? Are we retaining enough of our employees? Is the attrition appropriate? And then without that data, you're not able to develop a retention plan and mitigation strategies for identified issues. Strengths and barriers for professional development. The strengths is there's committed time to complete professional development. There's a lot of professional development that is available, and then websites have been created for easy access. The barrier is there's multiple websites, so trying to navigate where you're supposed to go for what. And then also an inconsistent approach across employee groups. So you can see that the dedicated days for professional development were inconsistent, who the providers were a bit inconsistent. And then there's also not a central repository or a learning management system. So there's not technology that helps with the process to make it less manual, and it helps for the ease of execution and tracking. So right now, as the HR department, we're deploying training or evaluations or whatever the case may be, and then you're having to manually track. We have a couple thousand employees, so trying to go back, whether it's myself or someone else within HR or the principals, trying to see who actually has completed it is not very easy. So that's something that needs to be looked into. And then the next in the cycle is create a plan and what are our priorities. So hiring, retention, and professional development each require its own continuous improvement plan with appropriate prioritization and timelines. Knowing hiring is definitely something that we need to take a look at, review it. The retention plan, I have been part of a large retention project, and it is time consuming because you need to collect the data. You have to slice the data. You're taking your staff members' times, then you're also needing teams to look at the information because retention issues could be across employee groups, it could be by building, so you're wanting to put the correct mitigation strategies in place. So that is a time-consuming project, as well as the professional development, technology, looking at some of those other areas and consolidations will take resources and additional time. Now, for the current HR priorities, we have been focused on the Department of Education citations. So those have been bullying and harassment, the teacher and administrator evaluations, and the peer review process. So that's why some of these areas haven't been a top priority for HR. So I just wanted to share that, the things that we currently are working on and why these areas may be on the back burner until these items are finished. Any questions?
Jamie, this is Allison. Sorry, I should probably put on my window so people can see me. I do have a couple of questions. So, first of all, thank you for making this presentation. It's really helpful and informative. I guess one question is, in terms of barriers to hiring, one of the things we've talked about in the past is pulling in candidates and more staff that look like our student body and our community. And we've heard that, it's just hard to find people to come here. Is that something that you guys are considering and have thought of as a barrier in terms of, I'm thinking in terms of equity and reducing disproportionality, and are you working on plans to improve some of those, some of the demographics of our new hires?
Yeah, so something that I have been working on with Jabari is looking at areas where we can improve the recruiting. So what I went over was more of the hiring piece. So the step before that is the recruiting piece. And we do recruiting a little differently in the district than I'm used to. We put a lot of work on the principals, and when we get to reviewing all of this and this becomes a priority, it's something I'd really like to look at, how we organize the HR department and having a true recruiting function. And with that comes then looking at areas where we need to recruit. I talked to Jabari and I have talked about going into the different colleges and embedding ourselves deeper, not just working with career development centers, but what are the organizations? What are minority teaching organizations within the colleges? What are some other, minorities in leadership? Or there's all kinds of different clubs and organizations within the colleges that we need to get deeper into and start reaching out to them. We need to have a more proactive approach in how we're doing recruiting, especially in areas where we're underutilized.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, and I understand, you can't do everything at once. So my other question and comment, so I think that website for people returning each year for here's all the things that I have to do, this year, I think that's fantastic. One-stop shop for what are all the trainings that I have to do. And I think it would be great if we can expand that to include professional development as it fits. You said that one of the barriers to retention was that we don't really have a learning management system to track that and to track those compliance issues and the professional development. So the website that's set up now, are you able to track who has completed each training? Or are you looking to the board perhaps to invest in something like a Canvas platform for the district, or even just some level of Google Classroom that you could use? I mean, I guess Google's probably not the right one because it has to have a certain level of security, but I don't know, that's a question for Gary. That you guys can use to track that, because I know onboarding has been something that we've had problems with in the past.
Sure. So what these websites are created off of a Google platform. So when somebody completes the training, they're marking off that they completed it, and then it gets loaded into a Google Doc. The problem is then, especially seen with the state citations, is they want to see what's your completion rate. Like, I want to be able to have a metric that I can show the board we're 80% completed this week, next week we're 90% completed. Right now, it's such a manual process. I'm only seeing who's got it completed, and then I need to go to see who needs to actually complete it, and the amount of labor that goes into that for each one of those trainings. Plus, that's also happening on the professional development side. So having a true learning management system, and that's something I wanted to talk to Bill Decker about, was I understand that the AEA has Moodle. I think it's Moodle. And then also looking at technology as far as even the evaluations. So we're doing evaluations are manual, Google based, which is fine. But when it comes to the citation and needing to report out to the Department of Ed, I spent 55 hours trying to figure out who actually completed it and going teacher by teacher and administrator by administrator. So having the right technology, in a sense, is a money-saving opportunity because of the amount of work across departments, the amount of work principals. I've seen what principals have pulled together to try and track their own building. There's so much energy put into these when the energy can be in other places that are more well-deserving.
Okay, thank you so much for answering my questions, and thank you for doing all that work. Hopefully we can find those efficiencies at some point.
So I'm looking for them.
Linda?
Again, Jamie, I want to echo Director Beck on thank you for putting all this work into this. One question that I had earlier in your slides, you had mentioned the food service, non-bargaining, and custodians were not contracted, but how is their professional development time worked in?
So that's something I'm going to have to actually ask, because I was pulling this together. They're receiving professional development, but I'm not 100% sure. I know in food service, there's different, certifications in food safety, and that the professional development's being done. I don't know how they're recording their time differently than what's, there's the contracted time in each of those contracts, but I know the professional development's happening. I need to get a better understanding of how they're tracking the time differently and how we're applying that.
Okay, thank you.
Jamie, this is Karen. I also appreciate all the time you've put into this presentation, and I understand the priorities being the Department of Ed citations. I would hope, though, sometime, especially getting towards spring, there'd be some way of at least doing an exit survey to people who are leaving the district to get some kind of handle on why are they leaving, because, you know, in the consent agenda, we are approving, it seems like a lot of people leaving, but we don't have any idea of why are they leaving Davenport. And so, you know, as it gets closer to spring, if we could at least get some type of exit interview or something to at least give us some direction of what is it that we're doing, not doing, to try to keep people in the district. But I appreciate what you've done.
No problem. And that's something that we could easily, I probably have an exit interview template that we could roll out. That's something that could easily be rolled out to start collecting that data. I appreciate the feedback.
Dan?
First, Jamie, I want to thank you for this because I think I made this board request way back in May, and it was a great presentation. And I know you put that you got the current human resource priorities by the Department of Ed with the bullying and harassment, teacher and administrative evaluations, and the peer reviews. But I think a lot of this stuff like coincides with that, because maybe with the retention part or the exit survey, maybe someone left because they were bullied or harassed. Maybe people are leaving because they're not getting the evaluations and stuff like that. Or, you know, they feel they're bullied and getting a bad review. So I do think that these things coincide. I've been trying to get this for a few years now, so I'm glad that someone took some initiative to do it. I do look forward to seeing what your plans are for addressing these plans and getting them moving forward.
Yeah, I'd have to say, since I started, just back when I interviewed, I was told about the, you know, hiring needed some improvements and retention and all that, but not understanding, I don't think there was a full understanding of how in depth the citations were and how much work was left there. So there's a lot of work with that, and then also the early retirement process, jumping ahead of some of that. So as we can knock some of these bigger priorities off, and then like I mentioned, with retention and even the hiring and doing the review, it's going to pull, we're going to have to tap on shoulders and pull in some resources. And I know a lot of people are really stretched thin right now, and so trying to do it at the appropriate time.
Okay. Well, I thought that's why we hired you. You were the best of the best.
I'm trying. No, I wouldn't say I'm the best of the best, but I'm trying.
I do appreciate this. I mean, you had the strengths, what we're doing good and what we're not doing good, so at least you addressed and acknowledged that, so we know what we need to do going forward. I do appreciate you taking the time and putting this together, and I do look forward to some further discussions as you get time to work on some of these things.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity to share this information. I enjoy the transparency.
Jamie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for this info, Jamie. Years back, it's been a while, but the district was experimenting with like a grow your own program. Do you know, do we have any program like that continuing right now that you're aware of?
We don't. Jabari and I have talked about that. So it sounds like the funding had gone away from that. And then there were also some issues that occurred during the Grow Your Own. So it's something that him and I have talked about looking further into. But we would need to start planning that, because you're going to have the budget to support some of the needs of those individuals and their education.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Jamie? Thank you very much, Jamie.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
We'll now move on to the discussion item concerning the IASB plan for board professional development. And there's Harry.
Hey, real quick before we jump into that, I do think there's a lot of that conversation that I didn't necessarily want to interrupt Jamie's report, but there's a lot of that conversation that does tie into the citations as she was talking about. And right now, the focus of the work that TJ and myself and Shane and the cabinet are focusing on are finance and violence prevention and crisis awareness. And, you know, we need to make some progress on those areas. But the representation of minorities as a part of staff and changing the makeup of the staff is one of the issues that will come up. And I think I was shaking my head on the grow your own scenario, because research says that that is one of the best ways to get candidates, because first of all, there's a shortage of all candidates. I mean, we should be doing grow your own just so that we have teachers in the next 4 to 6 years, just to get kids into a preparation program of any kind. But even beyond just doing it for everybody, that's the best way to get minority candidates as well. So I won't guarantee that that's the strategy that will be brought forward, but that is an issue that's going to be looked at once we get through the prioritization of finance and the work on crisis prevention. So look for more on that. Jamie did talk about wanting to talk to me about AEA resources, and on that topic, I don't know that I've heard any of our districts with a great solution towards that. And so we might be able to work not only with Davenport, but all 21 districts in the AEA to find a software type solution that can be helpful to everyone. So Jamie and I will have a conversation about that. Okay, sorry, Harry, I did not mean to take your time.
It's not a problem at all. I'm on your guys' time, so thank you. Hello, board. Thanks for your time again tonight. So this is an update, and Joe, if you would queue up the PDF, thanks much. By the way, like September, again, today Joe's been a dynamite support to help us get rolling. You have seen this document before. My colleague Siobhan interacted with you at the end of October in your meeting, and I just want to highlight a couple of updates that reflect conversation and planning that Board President Potts and Vice President Goza and Bill Decker and I have had as recently as last week, and this is intended to help kind of paint a picture where we're headed and add some specifics to it. So on the right-hand side, in the blue section, Bruce really refers to this as deeper dives, and that's really the intent of where we're going to focus the time at your committee of the whole meetings, and we'll look at the topics in a minute. And then the purpose there, those deeper dives, is to help prepare you with for database decision making and key questions to ask, and clarifying what's the role of the board contrasted with what's the role and the duties of your superintendent and administrative cabinet and others in doing that work. And then, Joe, if we'd slide down to the orange section, please, on that page. This section during your regular meetings is intended as shorter, and even in that, what we've referred to as applied board development. So if we've had deeper dives in the committee of the whole meetings, then it would be the opportunity to apply that learning and information during the regular board meeting. And so I would share an example. One of the things we're going to hoping and intending to look at on December 7th, one of two topics, is how to maximize the communication between board committees and whole board, and help support you in establishing that as a routine, so that then during a regular meeting, when a board committee would provide an update, then after that, the bottom bullet on this side in the orange would be, we would do on the spot after that, reflecting with you. What were the key things you gleaned or learned or became aware of from that committee update? Or if there's an update on progress around remote learning or violence prevention, whatever the topic, the update might be, then again, the whole board reflecting on what were the key things we learned, which of our questions that we asked helped really further our work in understanding what are next steps, what can be done to improve our process here. So that's the framework on the left side. And then if you'd bear with me, I'd like to, Joe, we'll go to page 2, please. Let's make that a little more concrete and then stop and interact for questions, clarifications, and thoughts you might have. And again, thanks for your patience. In this transition to interim soup and then with TJ's hospitalization, Bill has done a terrific job in helping be the glue that helps hold us together here, and we're looking forward to when and as TJ is able to climb back in and resume duties, how we can move forward without missing a beat. For December 7th, so a couple weeks down the road, 2 topics. And Kent, this might speak to yours and Karen's comment earlier about, and Bill mentioned, about moving forward and laying groundwork for budgeting down the road. Gary Sinclair and Patty Schrader from our office, Gary's going to lead that night, that committee of the whole meeting, on squeezing the most out of the 5cast information and helping to do some what ifs and forecasting with you as a whole board, using your current financial data with the idea to build that platform of understanding for the whole board, and that becomes a cornerstone or foundation for long-term planning and results. So that would be the lion's share of that committee of the whole meeting. And then the second item in the red would be maybe about 30 minutes. We have some those suggested questions that we worked with you on in September, and we would apply some of that work to what might that mean for board, committee, and whole board communications. Then, when we get toward the end of that committee of the whole meeting, then revisit, are we in good shape and ready to weave in a committee report or two from that night or ongoing work into your December 14th meeting. And it will be a little hard to tell until we work through those sample questions on the 7th. But we think by the end of that session, you'll be able to say, we're good to go, or we need more conversation around this. I'm going to pause there, and then we'll talk for a minute or two about the cycle or kinds of topics for the after the winter break, and the kinds of things we've identified, we being Bill, TJ, Bruce, Dan, and I, as topics for the subsequent board development in the winter months and in late winter. So, Bill, Bruce, or Dan, what else would you folks add to the things I've just shared? And then let's open it up to questions.
Harry, this is Dan. I think you touched on a lot of the stuff. I know, like, one of my main focuses was on getting questions together so we're getting the right answers to things, and how to engage more board members to ask questions and try, so we can get to the right data that we need, that we're asking the right questions and we know exactly what to look for and stuff.
Absolutely, Dan. That is embedded or built in the fabric of what we're looking to do here. And the other piece would be that it will make sense for Bill and TJ when he returns to be, once we firm up those key questions, that they're working with administrative and teacher leadership and staff on, here are the key kinds of things board wants to know, needs to know, and what else do you staff think's essential for the board to know, so that as a board, you can establish a real strong routine for getting the info you need. You mentioned that earlier tonight, Dan, on a different topic, and so have others. Yes, we want this to become routine and habits. Thank you. How about Bruce or Bill? Anything else you guys would add, please?
No, I was just what you had said, Harry, is that the overall purpose of this is to establish a long-range development plan for the board, so that the board has information routine that comes to us on a regular basis, and that the board knows enough about the information we're getting to ask valid questions to obtain information so that as a board we are making positive decisions and are all pulling in the same direction. And that happens when everybody starts with the same baseline of information and the knowledge of how to manipulate and delve into that information.
Absolutely. And well said, Bruce. And as an example, when Gary Sinclair shares information around the forecasting, not only does he build a strong presentation regarding those key questions, but for Gary to think out loud with you and say, and here are two of the most important pieces of information I built in, and here's why you need to know that. Here's why it's critical, so that all 7 board members are confident. And we want something to stick long after this process. Yes. Bill?
So I do want the board to know that it's not accidental, the topic that was selected here in December, because that idea of having a 5-year forecast and getting used to the assumptions is just building on the other work that has been done. So you recall last month, Gary Sinclair gave you some data that is going to be shared on a monthly basis. And so you're going to start to that'll be 12 times a year. You're going to find out what is the unspent balance projection for the end of the year. What's the unspent balance this month? What are the revenues this month? What are the expenditures this month? So you're going to have that as a baseline. Then you're going to have a finance committee that's going to meet monthly and go a little more in depth than that. And so then you get to, now you're getting all that information in 12 months, and then you get to December, and you heard Kent talk about, hey, we want to get going on this budget. Well, this is about the right time of the year to do a 5-year forecast for what do the next 5 years look like. And specifically, that 5-year forecast is going to include next year. And really after that December 7th committee of the whole, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what are the projected revenues, what then can be your projected expenditures. Do those expenditures need to be cut, or do you have some room to look at some of the cool ideas we've talked about tonight? I mean, better way of tracking professional development, better way of growing our own teachers. Do you have some room in your budget to do some of those things? And so it is the perfect timing to do that on December 7th this year, and probably somewhere around December 7th next year and the following year. And so it's not just accidental. We didn't just decide, oh, let's just do this. This is timely information for the board, and that's really what this whole conversation about is, to try to put timely, real conversations in front of the board, and then let's talk about it. Let's say, how should the board be thinking about these topics that are timely and real? And I do think that by the time we've gone through several of these, that you will start to develop those habits and routines, and it will get much easier as we go along. So I don't know if I covered what you wanted me to, Harry, but those are some of my thoughts.
That's good. I would just open it up to board members for questions, comments, or clarifications. Yeah.
Anyone have any comments, questions?
Bruce.
Linda.
Hi, Harry. This is Director Hayes, and again, I want to say thank you for your assistance in this. This kind of opens up my eyes, and I think the rest of the board can agree as well, with a lot of information being just thrown and you're not making decisions on half of the information, just to kind of have this preload up to where we're going. As you mentioned, Bill, with the December 7th meeting, Ken had just discussed the starting on the budget, and now this coming. It's almost like things are happening now in chronological order, where you can pretty much keep up with it and understand it clearly. So I'm thankful for everyone that's participating in assisting us in actually getting a plan together that we can understand it clearly and know what we're working with.
I'm encouraged that you can see that in the process here. Great.
Allison, was that you?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So there are 3 of us, I think, that are up for reelection in a year from now. And though, I hope to be on the board again, at least at this point, who knows what's going to happen in a year. I am wondering have we built in some processes to make sure that these data routines and these question asking routines are continued even if the board changes extensively?
Yes, in fact, that whole cycle, you've heard us use the word routine or habits built in, and there's not been a stronger voice in this initial planning than probably TJ or Bruce and Dan saying we have got to have a predictable board calendar that sticks in those big areas that are going to be cyclical every year. Have got to be a routine. We got to eat, breathe, and sleep that, where we don't even have to think about it anymore. And yes, it's in there, and shame on us if we don't get that to stick. Yes.
Awesome, and thank you so much for doing this for us. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's been helpful working as a mixed group and a team amidst all these transitions. And again, poor Bruce and Dan get the email 2 days before saying, when can you talk on Thursday or Friday? And they most always clear their calendars to make it work. So we will get there. Anyone else?
Ken?
Along with the general 5-year plan, I think we've talked about this before, but we also need a building plan, so that definitely ties into the finances. And another thing I think would be helpful down the road here, Bill, if we could get what our building capacities are, which buildings are being used effectively, which buildings are underused, and I think that will be helpful for the entire 5-year plan.
Yeah, just some comments on that. Ken, I think I may have touched on this before, but I'm happy to reemphasize it. There's about 4 items that TJ and I have committed to working to make sure that you have as a board by the time we get to April. And that would be an organizational design that works, that maybe puts a higher priority on what's happening in buildings as opposed to being as top down as it is right now. A calendar that was what we've just been talking about. So a board calendar that you will know exactly what should happen. We've also talked about a 10-year facilities plan, and specifically looking at efficiencies. I've made this comment several times, several places, and it is that if there's one room that's not being used in every building in the district, that in itself is paying for a school that doesn't need to be an expense. And that expense comes with a cost because, people do align and have positive feelings about every building in the district, and that's a good thing. But the reality of it is if you're a more efficient district, you can make better decisions for students. And so if we're paying for an entire building, we've got to have a plan for how to deal with that. So you will definitely get that information. And then just a facilities plan in general. And I have already had some conversation with Josh about that topic of getting that data going so that we have it when we need it. And just looking at having that full facilities plan so that we're taking care of facilities both in a maintenance perspective and what's appropriate for children.
I know you've got a ton of things on your plate right now, but I think down the road, some of this data will be beneficial instead of some of this coming to the board a week or two before we have to make a major decision, so that we can digest the information and then be able to move on it when we have to.
Jamie?
Yeah, kind of what Kent and Bill were talking about in regards to occupancy in buildings and capacity. We used to, I'm not going to say monitor that, but we used to have regular updates as far as where building capacity is at. And another thing that I think we're going to have to do as a board is determine what is the occupancy level that we want. As a district, and I don't know what it is now, I'm speaking from 4 years ago, our target capacity levels were 80%. 80 to 85% is what we considered a full school. You know, you don't want the walls busting out, but you don't want an open room in every building, as Bill was talking about. And maybe something now with as tight as budgets are, you know, as a board, we might want to look at, maybe we make our target 90%. You know, that's a conversation we're going to have. But building capacities is absolutely vital to monitoring our budgets. I mean, I can't think of a bigger impact on budget than monitoring capacities.
Any other questions or comments? Dan?
Harry, I'll get back to what we're originally working on, the workshops. And I don't need to touch on a lot of this stuff because we talked for like 2 hours, I think, on Thursday or whatever on things. But I know one other big area is like committee reports. When people are given committee reports, you know, what information is pertinent rather than giving a complete rundown. Because obviously we had those committees for doing those things so that the committee chair knows what they should report out on and, you know, key information to take back from their meeting to present to the board at a board meeting. And again, just so we're all on the same page asking the right questions, right? Because you have 7 different people with 7 different backgrounds and how we're all coming at things. And a future board workshop, I'd like to see maybe we work on something like that where everybody kind of gives their perspective on, you know, the things that they do and why they think along the lines that they do, I guess, if that makes sense. Because I think that helps a lot more. I know we did one a few years ago with the UEN and Margaret Buckton, and that seemed kind of good for the board. It was a good building process, and we kind of could go from there because you kind of understood where people were coming from and where they stood on things. But otherwise, I mean, we've had great discussions on this stuff. You've had great ideas, and I appreciate Bill helping out. And then I do appreciate the 2-day notice, but, you know, we make it work. I think we can get a lot of stuff done here. I do agree the committee of the wholes are where we really need to do the meat of things because it's the way that the meeting's structured. It's more of a discussion. But no, definitely, I think this is a good road we're going down. I think we've had some good things already, and I think as the board does these, the staff watch as well, and then they kind of know, well, hey, they're looking for this stuff, so they're kind of geared towards why the board is asking for certain things because they know what we're looking for and where we're coming from, and I think that'll help out a lot too. So
yeah, I would agree. And Dan, you're going to get your wish, Dan, at least on part one, part of the 7th. We've got our team has been working over the last few weeks. We've got some sample questions and think abouts for the board committee, whole board interaction. But it isn't the kind of thing where we hand off and say, use this, but we'll introduce that, talk with you guys as a board. You'll be able to refine and say, yep, this will work. Let's try it a couple of cycles and then we'll fix it. Or this is good, but here's an area that's missing. Okay, let's add it to it. And I think the real deal maker is going to be in those coaching reflection times each month where we say, okay, what's working well here? What needs to be done to tighten up things? I think we can get into a rhythm and a routine. Yes.
And again, I do think Harry, you and your team, we do appreciate it because it's make us a better board members and a board as a whole for our district. So thank you again.
Yep, you're welcome. We're glad for the opportunity. That's why we're here.
Anything else for Harry? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
We'll now roll on to policy discussion. Director Beck, you want to lead that conversation?
Yes, sorry, it takes a second to unmute. We have two policies for discussion tonight. They are fairly straightforward. The first one is the student records requirement. Originally, we had a very long policy that was fairly specific. The policy committee discussed replacing this with the IASB version that includes administrative regulations and accompanying exhibits. So that is the first policy that we have before you. So I guess I'd entertain any questions that anyone has on that. Again, this is about student records and who has access to them and how that access works.
Allison, I do have a question about student records. Why would we give student records to the U.S. Comptroller General, the U.S. Attorney General, the U.S. Secretary of State, or state or local education authorities? I was a little concerned about suddenly we're opening up saying, sure, here, you can have this. Organizations doing studies with names attached, that was a concern.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't know the answer to your first question about those, in particular about those specific organizations, but certainly I can find out. I agree that giving research organizations student names may be problematic. I'm going to guess that probably Mr. Decker may know a little bit more about why some of those things would be listed in here. And if not, certainly the policy committee can discuss that and bring it back to you guys at our next meeting.
There are some of those organizations that you're required to give data to, that you would be notified, but you have to give it to them. So having a policy that agrees with that requirement would be in your best interest to then not have to continually take action on that. There are other parts where it's probably left to administrative discretion, and I mean, I would assume that's what it is, as to whether it's appropriate use of data. And so, you know, you may be asked to be a part of a study that the results are going to be compiled in a larger area, and then those results can be brought back to you as a district to help you to improve in addition to other districts. So there's discretion. I don't think that means it's a blanket that just automatically records are going to be sent to all of those places. It just gives the authority to, so the board doesn't have to take action on each individual request with some administrative discretion. So that would be my, quick blush first take on it, but we can help get some additional research going on those topics if you'd like.
Karen, would you like the policy committee to look into that a little bit further?
I would. I also would like to have a discussion about the juvenile justice system, and it looks like that is the way it's written, that it would be optional language to put in there. Are we saying we are going to put that in there, or this is an option?
Okay. So what we'll do is put this on the agenda for the policy committee to find out, which of those agencies we're required to report to, and under what circumstances, which ones of those we have some discretion on, and seeing if we can't format some language that gives us a little bit more comfort in terms of keeping our students secure. Does that work?
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
That does.
Anyone else with questions or comments about this policy? And you guys will have to let me know. I can't see there.
Nobody has any questions here, no.
Okay. Then the second policy we have for discussion tonight is our graduation requirements policy. And we're doing two things here. Number one, we realized that we had updated it to reflect moving away from the block scheduling, but then we moved back to block scheduling. And so we needed to update the policy to reflect the number of credits students would be accruing under the modified block. And then we decided to use the format that the IASB has laid out, just with personalizations for our district. So if anyone has any questions on that one, I'd be happy to entertain those as well.
I also have a question. I would not like to see United States government stricken from what is mandatory. In this day and age, I think every student needs at least one class in U.S. government to know what's going on. And I would say the same about U.S. history. So somehow I would like those left in there with however many credits of one class would be worth to get it put back in there.
Okay, and we did discuss that at the policy committee meeting, and Mr. Scott can correct me if I misremember, but those are included and they are requirements for students to graduate, but they're not written out specifically because they're included in a different category. I'm sorry, I'm trying to flip between two screens here. I believe they're included in the social studies category, but certainly your explanation suggesting that maybe we put an emphasis on those classes is not a bad one. So we can revisit that as well.
Well, even if it says social studies 3 credits, including, like, it's probably 1 credit, or in U.S. government and 1 in American history or something, so that we're saying this is important.
Okay. Anyone else?
No one from here.
Alrighty. Well, that ends our policy discussion.
Okay. Board report. Board requests.
Bruce, I sent one to Mary.
Yes.
Just have her read it.
She's going to have to read it.
You're going to have to read it, please. Karen? Director
Okay.
Jerome, are you there?
Yep, I had to go back to my own email to find it.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't have it. This is for a future agenda item. Date of request, November 23rd. Description of the request, discuss the possibility of rescinding the resolution pandemic response and emergency suspension of policy put in place March 23rd, 2020. Why are you requesting it? The board needs to review and decide if this resolution should be rescinded or should continue. It has been in place for 8 months. I don't think when we put this in place, it was a permanent thing that we wouldn't revisit. I would like it on the December 14th board meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Gosa. Do you have another one, Karen?
Nope, that was it.
Okay. Director Beck?
Yes. One is is along the same lines, and this is an information item. I would like to know who holds the authority to declare online only learning for the district, and And the reason is I hear on the news often that many other boards vote on this decision, but we did pass that resolution that Director Klein-Jerome just discussed. So it may be that we have ceded that discretionary power to the superintendent, which would now be the state. But I'd like to just clarify whether we need to approve or vote on those decisions coming in the coming weeks and months.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Klein-Jerome. You had another one, Director Beck.
Yes, and my second one is actually Mr. Decker addressed this already, but I'll go ahead and put in the board request. I'd like to know how many of our students have been participating in online-only schooling with a breakdown by subgroup and age, elementary versus junior high versus high school. And I'd like to know what efforts have been made to ensure that those students are safe, food secure, and at least physically healthy. This is an information item, but it sounds like it should be an agenda item. The reason, if nothing else, this pandemic has exacerbated the digital divide. I know that the district has done a good job of trying to make sure that every family has internet access, but access does not equal equity. If we want to reduce disproportionality and reach all of our students, we need to be sure that we are reaching out personally and not letting anyone fall through the cracks.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Gosa. Any other board requests? There being no board requests, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. This meeting's adjourned. I now call to order the annual meeting. We have several action items on the annual meeting. First is the annual settlement report. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the annual settlement report.
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I recommend the board approve the annual settlement report as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Gosa. Is there any discussion of the annual settlement report? There being none, we'll move to a vote. Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Gosa?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome?
Yes.
Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director Poston?
Yes.
And my vote is yes. The settlement report passes. Chair will entertain a motion for the designation of financial institutions.
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I recommend the board adopt the following resolution. Resolved by the Board of Directors of the Davenport Community School District in the counties of Scott and Muscatine, State of Iowa, that the following named financial institutions are hereby designated as depositories of funds for said school district in the amounts not to exceed the amounts herein set forth, and the school district treasurer is hereby authorized to deposit the Davenport Community School District funds in the amount not to exceed named for said financial institution as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Beck. We have any discussion? Move to the vote. Director Hayes?
Yes.
Director Beck?
Yes.
Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome?
Yes.
Director Gosa?
Yes.
Director Poston?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, the motion carries. Chair will entertain a motion on the annual resolution for payment of bills.
Mr. President,
Director Snyder.
I move that the board adopt the resolution for the payment of bills. Be it resolved that in between regularly scheduled board meetings, that after the bills have been reviewed by the board and verified by the administration, board secretary, and the superintendent, the board president may be authorized to approve payment of claims and warrants drawn on the treasury for the several amounts, including payment of claims and salaries. Be it further resolved, the board will officially approve these warrants at the next regular board meeting, and the warrants will be entered in the minutes of record.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Director Hayes seconded, amongst others. Is there any discussion? We'll move to the vote. Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Postian,
Yes.
and my vote is yes, the motion carries. Board will entertain a motion concerning legal counsel.
Mr. Chairman,
Director Postian.
I move the board approve using the legal services of Lane and Waterman LLP to represent the corporation and advise the board until the board's annual meeting in 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Any discussion? Being no discussion, move to the vote. Director Postian,
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Snyder,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
and my vote is yes, the motion carries. Chair will entertain a nomination for a temporary chairperson.
Mr. President,
Director Hayes,
I move the board nominate Mary Carruthers, Board Secretary, to serve as temporary chair for the election of officers.
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
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 Mary, would you please come to the podium to conduct officer elections as
Okay.
temporary chair?
All right, so I'm going to explain the voting procedure for tonight. The procedure for tonight for voting for officers. I will have each board member vote at the same time. I will ask each board member to write down the name of the person they are voting for on the voting cards that I've provided to everyone. I will ask all board members to display their voting card at the same time. And then I will call on each board member to say aloud who they voted for while they are displaying their voting card. This will make the vote transparent and public and provide a record. After this, I will read the tally of votes and announce the person who won both president and vice president. This way, there will be a recording as well. So, I will start with the election of president. May I have a
Madam Chairwoman, I nominate Bruce Potts.
Director Potts, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Are there any other nominations for the office?
Madam Chairwoman, I nominate Dan Gosa.
Director Gosa, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, the nominations are declared closed. I would like to ask each nominee to share why they should be elected as president. I will ask or Director Gosa to go first.
I've served on this board. I think this is my 5th year now. I've been actively involved in trying to right the ship. I have asked the tough questions and stuff like that. I've been collaborative. I feel I work good with everybody here. I feel that as a board, we need a little more of aggressive stance on things, that we need to have a quicker turnaround on things. And as I said, working with Harry and ISB, I want to be a part of the process. I feel like I can do a good job for the board, and I would appreciate your support.
Thank you, Director Gosa. President Potts.
I think we're looking at another year of tremendous challenges, and I think it's important that we continue on the planning that we've done, the board training that we're talking about, so that we finally get to the point as a board where we don't feel like everything is a crisis, where we don't feel like everything is just toast popping out of a toaster at us. We need that long range look. We need to get away from running around like our hair's on fire, and I think it's important that we work together as a board, that we try to be as unanimous as we can. And that's always been my goal.
Thank you, President Potts. I will now ask each board member.
Madam Chairwoman,
Yes.
if I remember from last year, the rest of the board was allowed to speak if they wanted to. Is that correct?
We've never done that before, but if you would like to.
Well, I would if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Well, I nominated Bruce because what I like about what Bruce has done this past year, he doesn't try to dominate a meeting. He lets the rest of the board speak and have their discussion and then makes his comments after everyone on the board has had a discussion. I'm fired up about what this board can do, and I think under Bruce's leadership, we can move forward. And I just think his control of the meetings and just the way he conducts himself is an asset to the board.
Thank you, Director Postian. Since we've opened that up, did Director Klein Jerome, did you want to express why you nominated Director Gosa?
No, I'll let Dan's words speak for himself.
Okay. All right. So everyone take a moment and write down the name of who they would like to vote for president on your voting cards. Okay. Does anyone need more time? Okay. You can let me know when you're done, Director Beck.
I think we can chalk another one up to COVID, because I don't think we've ever seen a board election like this before.
Have you finished, Director Beck? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I will now ask each board member to display their cards so everyone can see. And then I'm going to call on, go ahead and display it, Allison. We all need to see it. Karen. Okay, I have a question. Director Beck,
Yes.
you have abstained.
Yes.
I'm not sure what that means and if we've ever had that before. So that means a tie and then the tie fails.
How do we know it's a tie?
Well, if there is a tie, then the tie fails.
Okay. So what happens then? Do we do it again?
I don't know. We've
There's-
never had this before.
There's not
We
a
don't have a
tie.
tie. Mary,
There's
no
not a
tie.
tie.
Okay. I haven't had a chance to look yet. All right. So I guess that's proper. I've never had that happen before, so I'll move ahead. All right, Director Snyder.
My vote is for Director Gosa.
Director Gosa.
My vote is for Director Gosa.
Director Potts.
My vote's for Director Potts.
Director Postian.
My vote is for Director Potts.
Director Hayes.
My vote is for Director Gosa.
Director Beck is abstaining. Director Klein Jerome.
My vote is for Director Gosa.
Okay. Director Gosa has 1, 2, 3, 4 votes. Director Potts has 2 votes. I therefore declare Director Gosa President of the Davenport School Board until November 2021. Okay. Election of Vice President. May I have a nomination for the office of Vice President?
Madam Chairperson, I'd like to nominate Ms. Linda Hayes.
Director Hayes, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Are there any other nominations for the office of Vice President?
Madam Chairperson.
Oh, sorry. Director.
I would like to nominate Bruce Potts, Director Potts.
Director Potts, do you accept the nomination?
No.
Okay, he said no. Are there any other nominations for the office of Vice President?
I nominate Allison Beck.
Director Beck, do you accept the nomination? Director Beck? I think we lost her.
Uh-oh.
I guess we'll have to wait
Yeah.
till she comes back on. Let me go ask Joe.
Can you guys hear me?
She's back.
Yes, now we can.
Sorry, my computer just quit. I thought I had time to plug it in. I apologize for that.
Okay. Director Beck, do you accept the nomination for the office of Vice President?
Yes. Was I nominated?
You were nominated by,
Okay.
you were nominated by Director Poston.
All right.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for the office of Vice President? Okay. So our nominees are Director Hayes and Director Beck. Director Hayes, would you like to share why you should be elected Vice President?
I feel that I have a really good working relationship with all the players that we're working with now with our upcoming crisis, and I do feel availability is an important factor as well. And I do have, the flexibility to attend the various meetings that are required.
Thank you, Director Hayes. Director Beck,
Yes.
would you like to share why you should be elected Vice President?
Yes. Sorry, I'm going to start my video here. I have been wanting to get a little bit more involved with the board since I've been on the board for the last 3 years. I think I have a good working relationship with everyone here. I think I offer a level head. I'm not afraid to ask tough questions. And I think I can be aggressive when necessary. And to me, it's important that we continue the work that we're doing. And I would be happy to do that as the vice president. And since I teach remotely for at least another year, my schedule is quite flexible and I'm able to attend meetings as necessary.
Thank you, Director Beck. Thank you, Director Beck, for some reason. Okay. Thank you, Director Beck. Next, I'm going to ask each board member to write on their voting card who they're voting for Vice President. Director Hayes or Director Beck. Is everyone finished? Okay, if every board member could please display your voting cards. All right, then I'm going to ask Director Snyder, who are you voting for?
Director Hayes,
Director Gosa,
Director Hayes.
Director Potts,
Director Beck.
Director Poston,
Director Beck.
Director Hayes,
Director Hayes.
Director Beck,
Director Beck.
okay, and Director Klein Jerome Hayes. Beck has received 1, 2, 3 votes. Hayes has received 4 votes. I therefore declare Director Hayes Vice President of the Davenport School Board until November of 2021. I will now administer the oath of office. If Director Gosa, please stand, raise your hand, and repeat after me. I, Director Gosa,
I, Director Gosa,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
to support the Constitution of the United States
to support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I faithfully and impartially,
and I faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of the office of School Board President
of the office of School Board President
in the Davenport Community School District
in the Davenport Community School District,
as now or hereafter required by law.
as now or hereafter required by law.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Director Hayes, if you would stand, please, and raise your hand and repeat after me. I, Director Hayes,
I, Director Hayes,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
to support the Constitution of the United States
to support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I faithfully and impartially,
and that I faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of the office of School Board Vice President
of the office of School Board Vice President
in the Davenport Community School District
in the Davenport Community School District,
as now or hereafter required by law.
as now or hereafter required by law.
Thank you. I now turn the chair back over to President Gosa, and I believe the next agenda item we have is committees. If I'm correct? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. The 12.06, the board standing committees. The agenda committee consists of the president, vice president, and superintendent. That doesn't change. There's a finance committee. Current members are Poston and Klein Jerome. Policy committee, Director Beck, Director Potts, and myself. Legislative Advocacy Committee, I think it was only me. Poverty Committee, Director Hayes. And then do I just have board members email me with what committees they want to be on? Is that how that works?
You can do it like that.
Okay. If everyone wants to email me what committees you would like to be on, if you want to stay on your current committee, and then we can do it that way. That good for everyone?
Could I ask a question about is there a policy that lists these committees, like I would like to propose that we add a committee. I would like to see a personnel committee that would be in charge of making sure evaluation of the superintendent and the board secretary is done on a timely basis. Since they are our two employees, I think a committee would be beneficial to get this done. But I don't know how to go about, how do we propose that we add a committee?
I'm not really sure. I might have to get back to you on that, but I think that is a good idea because we do need a committee to keep on top of that. I had a couple other committees in my mind, so I will get with Mr. Decker and see. Director Beck, you have your hand up.
I was just going to say, we don't have, as far as I know, policies on any of these committees. I would suggest that we look to IASB and maybe other districts to see sort of what their structure is. Just before we don't want to make too many committees because there's only 7 of us. And then my other comment was just going to be that I'm happy to continue serving as policy committee chair, if you're okay with that, if the board so chooses.
Okay. We will check with IASB to check on that, Miss Klein Jerome. And if everyone wants to email me your policy or your committees, and then is there any other discussion on that? Director or Vice President Hayes.
I guess I would also like to know, with that personnel committee, would that be more of an ad hoc or a permanent?
It would probably have to be it could be either, I guess, but we'll check with ISB, Siobhan, and see about that. And maybe that's something we can bring up in one of our workshops or something, because it was definitely something we were excited on. Is there any other discussion from Director Beck?
I would like to say we could also I believe we can do board requests for these kinds of things as well. So it might be worth Director Klein Jerome putting in an official board request so that it's on the record. Just a suggestion.
And we will come to that point here in a couple minutes. Is there anything else? Mr. Decker?
I mean, I do think you have a obvious, easy scenario coming up because we're going to have IASB on board and we're going to be talking about board committees at the next board meeting. So you're going to have a perfect entry into that conversation. I think maybe Director Goza and I can talk to Harry ahead of time so they come prepared for that conversation.
That's a good point. Thank you, Bill. Does anyone have anything else? Seeing none, administrative reports? No administrative reports. Board request. Director Klein Jerome, did you have a board request?
Do I have to write it up or can I just say what I wanted? I would like us to look into establishing a personnel committee that would be responsible for staying on timelines and doing the initial evaluation of both the superintendent and the board secretary to then bring that back to the board to finalize the evaluations and other things that would come up under personnel.
Okay. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Seconded by Director Beck. Director Klein Jerome, if you could type that up in an email and send that would be perfect.
I will.
Thank you. Are there any other board requests?
Director Klein Jerome, would it be an appropriate answer to your request if that is included as a part of the agenda at the next meeting, so we have IASB address what's the proper way to do that?
Sure, that would be great.
Okay.
Knocking them out. Are there any other board requests? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting
Aye.
adjourned.